Back with the candidates for Philadelphia District Attorney. Next question is going to you, Mr. Krasner. We're going to talk about corruption in Philadelphia politics. The list of politicians who have gone to jail even recently is embarrassingly long. Seth Williams, Shaka Fatah, Vince Fumo, John Purcell, Corey Kemp, Rick Mariano. There's another case involving strategists that is unresolved at this point. Is there an inherent reason why so many politicians in our town end up this way?
That's a great question. I think that there's an inherent problem with politicians, which is, I think, for the most part, they end up, I don't know how they start, but they end up being so egocentric and so concerned with their own careers that they get into shenanigans. And those shenanigans often involve moving money in ways you shouldn't. We've also had 3 justices of the Supreme Court, including Seamus McCaffrey, pushed out for some pretty outrageous behavior. So it is a local embarrassment. It is a statewide embarrassment. I think we need to push a different direction. I think one way to do that, frankly, is to stop doing things the way we've always done them.
Ms. Grossman, an inherent reason, like, is there something inherent in Philadelphia that might be part of this?
I think, and not to say one party is better than another, because you see it on both sides, but when one party is in control for so long, it really does lead to complacency and corruption, where it begins to become the accepted behavior. Well, that's how we do. And to me, that's just, it is so wrong for the public. You know, when you're a public servant, you serve the public, not your wallet, not your aspirations. And I think it really bears looking into, and I think prosecution is proper. It's got to stop.
Another question, I'm going to ask your expertise, both of you, in criminal justice. Philadelphia's homicide rate is among the highest among big cities in the U.S. It's 14% higher than last year. New York City almost has fewer murders, and it's 4 or 5 times larger of a city than Philadelphia. Why is Philadelphia so violent, Ms. Grossman?
I think we really have to focus on investigation and strong prosecution of gun crimes, especially illegal possession of guns. I think that is a huge problem. There's too much easy accessibility. When a 16-year-old can get a hold of a .45 caliber weapon, it's horrifying, and you need to focus on gun dealers such as straw purchasing. We have a gun violence task force, the DA's office, and you need to also look at possible, are there gun dealers where you're seeing an alarming amount of straw purchases out of there, or things not being monitored, possibly. And also, drugs are also tied into that.
Sure. Mr. Krasner, why is Philadelphia such a violent city?
Well, there are some short-term issues, things we can do that have not been done by my predecessors, and they include going after gun shops, and they include requiring people to report when their weapons allegedly disappear. But the bigger picture, we got to get real, is that this is the poorest of the 10 largest cities. It has some of the worst education of the 10 largest cities, and it's the most incarcerated of the 10 largest cities. We are putting our money in the wrong places. You want to stop crime, you have to start with education, you have to start with job training, economic opportunity, and drug counseling, among other things.
Mr. Krasner, are there too many people in prison in the city of Philadelphia? And if so, what do you tell people who would have to live amongst them if they are released?
So the truth is, for over 30 years, we have been engaging, and by we, I mean the prosecutors, have been engaging in a radical experiment of locking up as many people as possible. We have the most incarcerated of the 10 largest cities. We have a 700% increase in jail population in Pennsylvania in the last 30+ years. And since the 1970s, there's a 500% increase across the country. This is what conservative Republican politics have done to our country. So absolutely, there are too many. We got a higher rate of incarceration than for people of color than there was in South Africa during apartheid. It's absurd.
Go to Ms. Grossman on that.
Well, interestingly, the DA's office for the last several years, 30-some years, have been Democratic rules, so let me point that out. But over the last several years, I have to say there have been some good things that Seth Williams actually did, including working more collaboratively with the Public Defender's Office, with the court system, and probation and parole for diversion programs for less serious offenders. So they're not getting jail time, they're getting treatment, job training, GED, and if you invest on the lower level crimes of diverting people, it's almost an investment to keep them from recidivating and graduating to more serious crimes. And many of these diversion programs that I like actually have expungement eligibility, so people will serve their debt and then move on and become productive members of society.
On top of that, the costs of reform are always so high. does the city have the wherewithal to spend the money to make sure that these people don't commit crimes again?
I think, look, I think you have to invest up front. The DA's office in the court system, and we're always going to need as much money as possible if it comes from outside funding. We're working with the MacArthur grant that actually gave the city $3 million to work to decrease prison population. So you have to look for outside funding as well. I think that's very important.
Mr. Krasner on that?
Well, I mean, the MacArthur Award is basically an award for being absurdly incarcerated. And that is, in fact, what this DA's office has been doing for 30 years. I mean, you can't on the one hand say we're reforming and not own your record. We have a failing report card from this DA's office for making us safer, and we have a failing report card for reducing prison populations. It's that simple.
I think we have time for one more question. I'm going to jump ahead to something about marijuana. The state's going to allow medical marijuana at some point in the future. Should it go further or should it go backwards?
This state should permit recreational use of marijuana by adults in the same way we do beer. 80,000 people a year die from alcohol. 0 die from marijuana. The reality is that we have a choice. We can either be on the tail end of the legalization of marijuana, and we can have no tax benefits from it in the same way that Pennsylvania was on the tail end of gambling, or we can recognize up front that in 18 months New Jersey will have recreational and medical marijuana, and there will be a ton of money pouring into their schools while our schools fall apart.
Ms. Grossman.
I don't have a problem with the legalization of it for recreational or medical. Again, I agree with my opponent. It's for adult use, not minors. They shouldn't be using it. And also, I really don't. It's the same as an open container law. I don't like public nuisance and quality of life issues. People should not be smoking and walking down the street. But beyond that, I have no problem with that. We have a far bigger crisis, which is the heroin and opioid crisis that we have to focus on.
Closing statements after the break.